The Canadian Arctic, the center of the world. I want to talk about the Canadian Arctic not as something marginal to the Canadian public policy discourse or debate, not something remote geographically from southern Canada as we tend to see it, and not something frozen, which it's increasingly not. I want to change our construction and indeed build on some of the recent remarks by the Premier of Northwest Territories, Bob McLeod. Let's start to see the Arctic as indeed central. Central not just to the Canadian condition in our future, but central to the world. Yeah. Let me prove it to you. We got our familiar framework, A, C, R, E. I hope you've committed this to memory by now. America, China, Russia, Europe. Here's our Arctic, the 3 territories. Beautiful Yukon is as big as France. NWT is as big as France, Germany, and Ukraine combined. And Nunavut is bigger than both of them. Combined, all combined, these territories are equivalent to the European Union, not including the Brexiteering Brits. So this is huge, and this is the upper third of Canada. And by the way, it is melting. It's not melting figuratively. Climate change is very real. No one is denying that. And the major consequences are in the north, not in the south. So let me just stop there and do a quick digression. If you believe in climate change in Canada, and if you are a climate change activist or proponent of major action, if you think it ought to be a primary concern for Canada, your action ought not to be in respect of Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Halifax, Edmonton, Calgary, Ottawa. Nay, these are southern cities which are very much at the margins of any climate change debate or action in the world. No matter how they transform themselves, climate change is not a Toronto question. If you really believe it in Canada, our object is not to say that Toronto or Ottawa, through its physical actions, will somehow transform Canada and the world and reverse the climate tendency. Nay, that is a pipe dream. That is a conceptual nonsense. The main climate change enjeu in Canada is the Arctic. That is where it is happening, and that is where Canada both has the biggest stakes and can be world historical in its impact. How can you deny that? This is a territory as large as the European Union, okay? And it touches on most of the world, to which we'll return in a second. So again, climate change is not about Toronto, Vancouver, and Edmonton willing the change of the global climatic vector. It is about how Canada deals with this upper third, which is as large as the European Union in total. And so what do we do up here? I want us to see it as central to the Canadian condition, primordial in terms of our future, because if we don't do something, we're crushed by these larger powers. We have only 115,000 people for all of this territory, 115,000 people. That is the size of New Tecumseth County in York Region. Much smaller than Richmond Hill, much smaller than Vaughan, and certainly a drop in the bucket compared to metropolises like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver. 115,000. So what are we going to do? Let's reconfigure the Arctic as central. It is central because through the Arctic, and let's take, I think, the most obvious example, Yellowknife. Let's see Yellowknife as a potential hub to China, the future world's largest market, to which it's closer than Australia, to Russia and the whole Eurasian Union, to which it is closer than Newfoundland and Toronto, to Europe through the Nordic states, 500 million people, to which it is closer again than any other major Canadian city, and of course to the United States through Alaska, 330 million people. All told, China, Russia, and the Eurasian Union, Europe, and the United States, we have a potential market if we look at Yellowknife or other major parts of the Arctic as hub-like constructions, but I want to focus on Yellowknife. The market is 2 billion people. 2 billion people, whereas the American market alone is 330 million people. Now, this is not some abstract dream because, again, this is opening up fast, not just the Northwest Passage, but aviation possibilities. Let's put an accent on the aviation mode, which, again, the NWT Premier has accentuated. Through air travel from Yellowknife, you can get to Beijing, to Moscow, to Murmansk, to Copenhagen, to Stockholm, and, of course, to Fairbanks, Alaska, and Anchorage very, very fast by comparison with southern airports. So let's imagine 10 years from now that a city like Yellowknife becomes not marginal to the Canadian imagined debate, but indeed a hub, a transport hub in the first instance, an economic hub, much like Singapore is to Southeast Asia and Dubai is to Western Asia, to the new Arctic space. Yellowknife is a hub to China and Asia, all of Northeast Asia, to the Eurasian Economic Union, in particular Russia, to all of Europe, and to continental North America and our largest existing market, the United States. Now that's not boring.